Hi everyone, welcome to a special episode of Trade Australia. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. Today's episode is brought to you by Baker and it's all about EU and UK e-commerce and FTA update. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers from all around the world in a literal sense. So joining me, we've got Marisa Hut from Baker in the Netherlands. We've got Alison from McIntyre Hudson over in the UK, and Darryl Daisley closer to home in WA from Pitcher Partners. So over the course of the next half hour or so, we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest changes, which are really important changes on the e-com, and as well as touch on the FTA updates with the EU and the UK with Australia as well. So to kick it off, we're going to speak to Marisa Hut from Baker in the Netherlands. Hi Marisa, how are you?
Hi Lawrence, hi, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. And I love the bright colours and really great. I'm sure it's a morning there over the Netherlands, so thank you so much for being part of it, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity with Trade Australia and Baker Tilly to really educate and update Australian companies and global companies as well about these important changes that are taking place over in the EU.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, Lawrence.
So Marisa, I'm going to kick off. E-commerce has grown exponentially, especially during COVID. So let's take it right back to the beginning. What's changing? When's it changing? And I've got a couple of questions I want to throw at you, but it'd be great for you to give the audience a bit of a background and an overview of why it's so important we talk about this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, the EU is going to change its e-commerce legislation for VAT purposes as of July 1st of this year. So in nearly a month, the changes will come into effect. And who will be affected by these changes? Well, it will be all businesses selling goods to consumers in the EU. And it doesn't matter where you are established, whether you are established in the Netherlands or whether you are established in the United Kingdom or Australia. These changes will affect your business if you are selling goods to consumers in the EU. Yeah. And the question is, of course, how will these affect you? And that all depends on the facts and circumstances.
I know it's a really unique question that you just asked there, is because everyone, especially from an e-commerce perspective, everyone's got different fulfillment and supply chains. So it's a really complex, it's not a one-stop answer. So one size fits all answer. Actually, I've sort of tripped myself up a bit because I wanted to ask you about on OSS, a one-stop shop. I know that forms a big part of the legislation and the way that this is explained. So for the viewers who don't understand what a one-stop shop is, how would you define that, and why is it so important for them to get this right?
Yeah, well, currently it all depends on where you have your goods located. So if you are an Australian business and you have your goods located in a warehouse in the EU, let's say the Netherlands, that is where your stock is being held by a third party. Currently, when you're selling goods to consumers in the EU from that warehouse, you are charging them either with Dutch VAT, because that's the country of departure, the Netherlands, or you are charging them with local VAT of the EU country of arrival. It all depends on whether or not you breached a certain threshold for specific distance sales in the EU. And these thresholds vary per EU country. All these thresholds will disappear. So as of July 1st, there will no longer be a threshold, especially if you are not established in the EU. So if you hold stock with a third party and you are selling those goods to consumers in the EU, these changes will affect you immediately. And every sale of those goods to consumers will be subject to VAT in the EU country of arrival. So if you are selling goods from that warehouse in the Netherlands to a consumer in Germany, German VAT is due. If you're selling goods from that warehouse in the Netherlands to consumer in France, French VAT is due. Lawrence, you can imagine that if you need to pay German VAT and French VAT, it needs to be reported in a way, and it needs to be paid to the local tax authorities. Well, a part of these changes is that a one-stop shop return will be implemented specifically for these sales of goods. And what is a one-stop shop return? As an Australian company with goods located in a warehouse in the Netherlands, that Australian company can register for the one-stop shop with the Dutch tax authorities. If it's registered for the one-stop shop, it files a special return, and in that return, it is reporting the German VAT due, the French VAT due, Spanish VAT due, all VAT due in these EU countries. It files this special one-stop shop return with Dutch tax authorities, and the Dutch tax authorities will then forward the payments of the VAT that is done in total to the Dutch tax authorities. The Dutch tax authorities will forward it to the tax authorities in France and to Germany, and so on.
Great. So that's all done once they've actually done that one-stop shop lodgement, if you like. And I remember some of the information that I've been reading up on, prior to preparing for the episode. There's a bit of a threshold with that as well. Is it a €10,000 threshold for that reporting?
Yes, Lawrence, that is indeed correct, but that threshold is only applicable for businesses established in the EU or having a VAT fixed establishment here. And be aware that if you're only having a VAT registration in an EU country, that doesn't mean that you also have a VAT fixed establishment.
Right. Well, that's one of the big questions that I know I need to ask you, Marisa, is that there's a couple of things there. What do companies need to understand? If we're talking to Australian companies, as our majority audience are for this show, when do they need to start preparing for all this? Because by the time this episode goes to air, we're pretty much in June. We've got 1st of July implementation. So, if they haven't started, it sounds pretty urgent. Would you agree?
Yes, it's very urgent. They need to start as soon as they hear from it with preparing. Yes, definitely. Because if you do not register, if you would like to use the one-stop shop return, the OSS, as we just mentioned, you need to register for it. You need to apply for it. And if you apply too late, you will have an issue. And then you cannot pay that VAT due in all these EU countries to the one-stop shop return. But then you need to register in the specific EU country and file local VAT returns. And you can imagine what an administrative burden and costly operation such a thing is.
Yeah. And it sounds like even the freight providers and forwarders and brokers would actually be struggling to keep up to date with this as well. And they're used to trying to clear customs and manage freight consignments, whether it's air freight or sea freight. But then they wouldn't have this, I'm guessing, this type of level of expertise, and that's why Baker Tilly and the global group are so important for these type of structural changes or preparations, if you like, about how to make sure that the business is doing the right thing, but also taking it back to real basics. So, Marisa, if I'm an Australian business, I want to make sure that I can do fulfillment within 24 to 48 hours into an EU market. What are the simple steps I need to take?
Yeah, of course, you need to determine what the best logistical setup for you would be. Well, 24 hours to 48 hours from Australia is not going to work. No. If you are going to ship the goods directly from Australia to the EU. So the logical thing would be set up some sort of warehouse location in an EU country, arrange those kind of things and make sure that these packages can be picked and packed and sent, and arrange your VAT obligations. Yes.
Yeah. So, Marisa, what are the steps that a company needs to comply with within the EU right now?
Yeah. Establish your business model. Make sure that you know what you would like to do. And if you have a setup in the EU with a 3PL or a warehouse service provider, know what your VAT obligations are and know what you are must arrange for July 1st, 2021. Also think about VAT rates. These differ per EU country. The general VAT rate varies between 17 and 27% in the EU. If all your supplies of goods to consumers in the EU are subject to VAT in the EU country of arrival, you must know the VAT rate, of course, in advance. This will also influence your pricing. So these are all adjustments that you must make, take into consideration, and start preparing. That's the main thing to do.
Wonderful. And just to wrap up with the EU, just the specific discussion, there's obviously advantages and disadvantages that emerge with this legislation change. What are the opportunities for businesses, and possibly what are the advantages that companies can take advantage of? Well, that sounds what are the type of opportunities that companies can take advantage of?
Yeah. Well, you have the entire EU market at your feet, which is one simple OSS registration, filing one OSS return for all these sales to other EU countries. You can sell to all consumers in the EU.
Yeah, so really it brings a one-stop solution to the whole region, to the EU region.
Yes. And you have a much lower cost also to be VAT compliant, for example. If you currently had to register multiple EU countries, those costs will fall. Those costs will no longer be applicable because these registrations are no longer necessary. Yeah. You can report everything to one return. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, and you can see why it's so important to get the right preparation and right structures in place to start with.
Yes, indeed.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Marisa. I really enjoyed having our chat. It sounds like there's great opportunity, but get the foundations right first, speak to experts such as yourself, and part of the whole global network with Baker Tilly means that no matter where the companies are, they can tap into the network and reach out to the whole team such as yourself. So thank you so much. And we'll be back straight after the break. We're going to speak to Alison Horner, part of the Baker Tilly network, but over in the UK. So let's chat with her straight after this break. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching a special episode brought to you by Baker Tilly. It's all about EU and UK e-commerce and FTA update. Joining me now, all the way from the UK, is Alison Horner. She's a partner at McIntyre Hudson as head of the indirect tax team over there. Thanks for joining me, Alison.
Thanks, Lawrence. Good to see you, and good morning from the UK.
Great, thank you. Alison, we've just heard from Marisa over in the Netherlands, and there's so many things happening over there with the EU e-commerce, but similarly, there's a whole range of changes with the UK as well. Can you give us a little bit of background about that?
Yes, well, of course, as you know, we had a little thing called BREXIT happening on the 1st of January this year, which was such a challenge and still is for all businesses trading with the UK. But at the same date, on the 1st of January, there were changes to e-commerce rules and VAT that were brought in that largely went unnoticed and have tripped a lot of people up. So I'm here today to talk to you about those changes and how they will affect businesses trading in the UK.
Yeah, I think with everything going on with the UK and Brexit as well, I think so many companies have left a lot of things as you said, undone and unprepared for. So I think it's a really good timely reminder to get all their ducks in a row, especially what's going on now as of the 1st of July with the EU. So one of the things I want to ask, if I'm an Australian company, do I need to register for VAT? And what if I'm selling goods that are over that value threshold? I think it's £135. Is that correct?
Yes, this is what the changes have affected. Any goods that are sold in a single consignment for £135 or less, the new rules say that the business has to be registered for UK VAT. There's no other rules attached to it. It's compulsory. And the rules also affect the way that the customs declaration is done. So there's a new customs procedure code that has to be used in order for those goods to enter the UK without further duty or VAT being charged to the consumer. So the Australian business would register for VAT and they would charge VAT in their price when they sell the goods to me as the consumer.
Right. It sounds a bit complicated. I mean, it's something that Australian companies probably haven't prepared well enough for, especially, as you say, trying to overlay that with Brexit as well. Is it something that that they should be looking to appoint a fiscal expert or a tax representative to help them with?
Well, actually, in the UK, there's not a compulsory requirement to have a fiscal representative or tax rep to be able to trade in the UK. What there is, and which is proving a problem, is getting an indirect customs representative to act for you. And both Marisa and I are finding that this is one of the biggest challenges to do with Brexit and trade generally within the UK and EU sort of areas at the moment, because there's been such a massive change that customs agents are so sort of under pressure, and there's a shortage of them. And of course, an indirect representative means that they have joint and several liability for VAT and customs duty. Now, with these new rules under £135 or less, there won't be any import VAT or customs duty. So hopefully it won't be as big a problem, but that's the only representation that you need to consider.
And that leads into my next questions. What happens if I sell to consumers over £135?
Yeah, sure. Now, Marisa was mentioning about, and you were, about Australian businesses. You know, you're on the other side of the world to us. You probably have a 3PL or a warehouse in the UK or EU area. If you do, you've probably bulk shipped into the UK. So you're probably already registered for VAT in the UK and storing your goods here. And certainly if you're selling on the big online marketplaces, there is a big push for businesses to be registered for VAT. So if you're shipping over £135 in bulk and you're the importer, then you're probably already registered for VAT. But if you're not, and you're shipping, say, one-off shipments direct to, say, me as a consumer, and it's over 135, the old rules can continue. You can still make me as the consumer the importer of record, and I'm responsible for those import taxes and customs duties. So that's still available as an option for Australian businesses.
Understand. Great. So that's a good clarification, because it does sound like there's a bit of a, as you say, it sounds quite daunting, especially for companies who £135 isn't that much. So there's, it's a fairly low threshold for products that someone might want to sell online to the UK. What about if I need to, how do I submit a VAT return? How is that something I can go about doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, getting registered for VAT, because you don't need a representative, you could ask somebody like our firm would help you to get registered for that and set you up online. That's not a massively complex process, and it doesn't take, now that Brexit's been and gone, it's quicker now, so it might take you 3 or 4 weeks to become registered for VAT. And then submitting a VAT return, they're quarterly. Again, you could ask a UK provider to help you submit that, because we have making tax digital rules, so we use bridging software. Alternatively, you may have software that can connect directly with HMRC, and it's done on a digital transfer via the UK government gateway.
Right. So it sounds quite similar to what we've got quarterly BAS returns over here, the business activity statement. Sounds like a similar type regime over there.
That's absolutely right.
Alison, if with all these changes, is it recommended, or what are your thoughts on setting up a UK subsidiary? Is it something that's worth considering for companies if they're doing consistent or even growing their e-com business?
Yeah, and this is a question, again, that Marisa and I have been asked an awful lot about trading in the EU or the UK. Now, it's really important to understand that you're not obliged to have a UK entity in order to trade in the UK. You're obliged to be registered for VAT if you're the importer into the UK, or under these new rules for e-com for 135 and below, but you don't have to have an entity to do that. Where we find is a problem at the moment is all down to that representation and actually getting your goods through customs. And if you're finding it really difficult to get that indirect customs representative, and if you are, planning, well, I'm going to have a warehouse here and actually it suits me to grow my business for people to trade with a UK entity, then yes, of course, that will help you, but it's not compulsory.
And I think that's where your expertise and your team comes in, Alison, I should say, is that because you can look at a company's case-by-case scenario and then give them the proper advice for where they are right now and where they want to be in the future. So, I think that's really emphasises what we discussed even with Marisa previously, is that every company's situation and their aspirations are different. So it's important to get the right structure in place and the right advice. One of the final questions I wanted to ask you on the UK, and I'd love to bring you back in later in the show as a Q&A with Marisa and Darryl, but I want to ask you before we leave the UK discussion, what about digital services? If we're selling digital services online, what are the impacts there?
Yeah, now this is important, because there are special rules relating to digital services and VAT. And obviously the UK was in Europe, and within Europe, we had the mini one-stop shop, MOS returns, where an Australian company would have been obliged to be registered for VAT somewhere within Europe, including the UK. Now, if you were registered in Europe and you're still selling digital services in the UK, you need to be registered separately in the UK now for your digital sales to consumers. So that is a compulsory registration again.
Yeah, it's an important highlight. As you say, many companies may not be aware of that, or they're only playing catch up with that. And now with the changes kicking in 1st of July with the EU, it could be a really good reminder for them to get everything right in the UK as well. So thanks so much for joining us, Alison, on this particular show and on this segment on the UK. As I mentioned, I'd love to bring you back in at the end of the show for a bit of a panel discussion with all three of you. So look forward to seeing you after that discussion with Darryl. But right now, we're going to cut to a break. Stick around. We're going to speak to Darryl Daisley over in Perth, and we're going to talk about the Australian perspective on some of these changes and a bit of an FTA update as well. So we'll see you very soon.
We are
Baker Tilly, global providers of assurance, tax, consulting and advisory services.
Ranked among the world's top 10 branded networks,
Baker Tilly brings the power of a global network into local communities to help our clients make decisions that help them achieve their goals.
We're growing, and we are looking for you to join us on our journey.
our vision is to combine your talent with ours, to create a partnership that helps our clients face the future with confidence.
Our impact is global, stretching across 145 territories.
Our more than 36,000 team members have achieved a combined revenue of $3.9 billion in 2019.
Our growth is strategic, and we continue to maintain a local presence
to ensure a deep understanding of context for your business.
Working with Baker Tilly means the future is never faced alone.
We are committed to making a difference for our clients,
our people,
our communities,
and our profession.
We are Baker Tilly.
Nosotros somos Baker Tilly.
我們是 Baker Tilly.
We are Baker Tilly.
And we will never lose sight of you. Now for tomorrow.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching a very special episode on the EU and UK e-commerce and FTA update here on Trade Australia. Proudly brought to you by Baker Tilly. And part of the Baker Tilly network is Pitcher Partners. Our expert over there, good friend of the show, Darryl Daisley, joins us over in WA. Thanks for joining me, Darryl.
Lawrence, pleasure, as always.
Darryl, look, I mean, you've got amazing expertise around international trade, but what's your take on what you've just heard from Marisa and Alison and how, these changes that are taking place and have taken place already in the UK, how do we get our heads around that over here as an Australian company?
Yeah, look, I mean, really good question. I think what resonates when I hear my colleagues from the EU and the UK talk is that, they are the experts in country on the ground in relation to these changes. So, being an Australian-based practitioner, I've got some high-level knowledge in relation to the changes. But really, if you've got a company like out of Australia wanting to trade into those markets, it is vital that you've got connectivity into, in-country experts. And, Marisa and Alison live and breathe it every day.
Really strong.
It's really critical.
And similar to you, I've got so many companies in my mind thinking through, just listening to Marisa and Alison, that they want to grow that EU market, they want to grow in the UK, and they've got to put the right pieces of the puzzles together now, because if they don't, they're going to hurt themselves and not going to get advantages that they should with this whole OSS and the new reporting structures, the threshold changes in the UK. So every company is different. And one of the things that, as you pointed out, they really need to have on-the-ground experts who can understand their unique situation and then give them the right advice for now and for future opportunities.
No, absolutely. And seeing these girls operate over the last couple of years, certainly around BREXIT and the impending changes, and then now all these relevant changes in the EU, it's vital. But from an Australian perspective, I mean, these two markets, being the EU and the UK, are some of the last bastions of, the trading connection. as you're well aware, we've got some sensational free trade agreements in place with our northern neighbours, and some of the last markets, that our country's been considering the adoption of appropriate free trade agreements is with the EU, and now an extension from that is with the UK. So a lot of significant interest in Australia in terms of where these free trade agreements are at and how they're progressing.
Well, that's one of the key reasons I wanted to have you on the show, Darryl, because that FTA expertise and the impacts on Australian FTAs. So what are the current concerns with the Australian and the UK FTA agreement? I know it's sort of been a long time and there seems to be a lot of tussling and throwing around that. What's your take on the current situation?
Well, it's interesting because it's in reality, it's been a short time. So if this free trade agreement, the negotiations have been at breakneck speed, with Boris and the UK government very keen to establish free trade agreements with anybody, and Australia's up there. Well, I mean, certainly within the UK, the reporting that we've seen is that large blocks of particular industry sectors have got some concerns, and the UK farmers are probably at the top of that. But even in the last day or two, there has been some commentary coming out of the UK government that those concerns have been heard. But notwithstanding that, I think we're going to see a formal signing of the Australia-UK agreement in early June. Wow. And that's going to align with the G7 meeting where Australia's been invited to sit on the sideline. So my little spies are telling me that potentially we're going to see a signing on or around the 9th of June, which would be, reasonably historic. That doesn't mean that it comes into effect the next day. It's still got to go through both houses of parliament, both parliaments in both countries. But that significant hurdle has been jumped over, very, very rapidly.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting news, and as you say, it'll be a quite momentous day once that gets ratified. And I'm sure I've heard a similar commentary, I should say, about the UK farmers' feedback, but looks like it's full steam ahead. And I think it's really exciting. What about things like the Australian and EU negotiations? I want to talk about that as well, because all of this plays back into context around the e-commerce laws and everything else that have changed. So where are we at with the EU and Australian FTA? Yeah,
look, so, it's quite evident the Australian government through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, have been working furiously behind the scenes on not just the UK agreement, but the EU agreement. Now, the EU agreement, they've just concluded the 10th round of talks. And that concluded in early March of 2021. And in the current climate and environment, that was 50 or 60 Zoom calls, lengthy calls with the respective government agencies from both sides, going through all the very, very fine detail. Now, there is a further round in early June, so only a couple of weeks away. So the 11th round will be taking place. But overlaying that, in recent months, there's been some commentary around a potential carbon border tax, and that's been mentioned by the EU. So that's problematic for the Australian government to some extent. But having said that, there is still significant support to try and get that particular free trade agreement ratified as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, wonderful. What I'd like to do, I know that there's so much to talk about the FTAs, but thank you for that update, because the early June for the UK, it sounds like there's a lot of progress happening with the EU, and that carbon border tax comes in. That's going to, as you say, complicate a few things, but I don't think that will be a deal breaker. Australians will have to work their way through that. But I'd love to, because the theme of this episode is about the e-commerce and the FTA update, one of the things that I'd love to talk to you all about is, if I'm an Australian business listening to all three experts here on the show, do I think, hang on, we're talking about FTAs, do I have to wait to find out what's going on with the FTA before I implement e-commerce? Because I know that Marisa was talking about 1st of July, we need to get our act together. UK has already happened in January. I shouldn't be waiting for FTA, should I, Darryl? It should be stuff that is going to be FTA regardless, as from an e-com perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess from an e-commerce perspective, we've got those low-value type shipments. And interestingly, most first world countries have low-value thresholds, which are meant to streamline the movement of those smaller shipments. But the low value thresholds vary significantly around the globe. So the US, it's $800. Australia, it's now $1,000. But we now collect GST under that $1,000. The UK, it's only £135. And the EU is how much, Marisa?
Pretty much zero, I think now.
€50. It will be €150 as of July 1st, 2021, Darryl.
Yeah, so, straight away that shows you, depending on where you're moving your product, yes, there, e-commerce could be potentially subject to varying thresholds.
Yeah.
And the thing for me that has been problematic over the last, since January, February of last year with COVID, the impact on the supply chain. So, out of Australia, we've got some significant issues around air freight, and the cost of air freight. And then there's, ever increasing problems around sea freight as well. So depending on where the cargo's moving from and to, globally freight rates have been
skyrocketed,
significantly impacted. Yeah. And that all gets passed on to the consumer, in some way, shape or form.
Darryl, what I'd like to do is ask you to hold. I'm going to cut to a break so that we can put all three of you on screen together. And then I want to open up the discussion, just tease out a bit more about these two important topics about the e-com and the FTAs. So let's go to a break. Let's come back straight after and we'll have all three experts at once on the discussion and we'll throw a few questions at them. Join us straight after this. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching a very special episode on the EU and UK e-commerce and FTA update. You've just heard from amazing experts such as Marisa Hut from Baker Tilly over in the Netherlands, Alison Horner from MHA McIntyre Hudson over in the UK, and Darryl Daisley over here in WA in Australia from Pitcher Partners. So I've asked them now to rejoin so we can wrap up this episode with a really robust Q&A quick panel session. So thank you all for joining me once again. So Marisa, I'm just going to quickly open up with yourself. Thank you once again for that great insight on the EU changes. Now, there's a lot of opportunities that you talked about with Australian companies and global companies who want to go into the EU market and really treat it now as a region for e-com and e-commerce growth. What's your view about some disadvantages? And obviously, we talked about timing and how critical it is now for companies to really get their act together right now, do the infrastructure so that come 1st of July, they can actually hit the ground running. What are some of the disadvantages if you don't get this right?
Well, if you don't get this right, Lawrence, it could become a costly operation because all these sales of goods to consumers in the EU will be subject to VAT, so taxed with VAT in the EU country of arrival. That means local VAT in such an EU country of arrival must be paid. And if you do not register for the one-stop shop or not on time, you need to register locally in these EU countries and file local VAT returns and comply with the local legislation. And that's costly, and every EU country has different filing periods, different payment deadlines. So yeah, that's why it's a huge administrative burden. And that's also the reason why the EU now simplifies it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you can't, it's practically impossible to try and navigate every country on its own. So it does make a lot of sense to
yeah, Currently, that is being done, of course, by companies selling to consumers in the EU. But indeed, it's a huge administrative burden and cost for a business to comply with such regulation. Yes.
Thank you, Marisa. Yeah. Alison, can I ask you, Alison, you mentioned in your discussion with our segment on the UK, the important role marketplaces play in e-commerce and a growing role. How do you see that in the future? I mean, I think you've got big global juggernaut marketplaces. How have they had to adjust with these type of changes, both in January over in the UK? Have you seen some of the way that they do business change?
What we've seen is, I mean, they were already very vigilant because there are already rules relating to joint and several liability for overseas businesses having to be registered for that in the UK. And those rules have ramped up even more. And with Brexit, there's been a real push to get the sellers to be registered for VAT, both in the UK and also in Europe. So, for example, if you held stock in the UK warehouse for an online marketplace, and those goods could be moved over to Europe, they would insist that you registered for that in Europe as well. So the online marketplaces will not act as the importers ever, and they put that onus onto the seller.
Yeah, because that's an important part for the viewers to understand. If they think that's because they sell on that marketplace that they can wash their hands of, it's not the case. It's quite the opposite.
It's not the case, and the online marketplaces are very. I find that they're very, very strong in directing sellers what to do. And in the UK, the changes, the £135 and below changes, that also affects the way that you do business with the online marketplaces, because the OMPs are responsible for declaring that VAT. So there's another layer in there that Australian businesses need to be aware of when trading on online marketplaces in the UK.
Yeah. Darryl, can I ask you here quickly, in your opinion, how many Australian companies are ready or prepared for what we've just talked about back in January with the UK and coming up on the 1st of July in the EU?
Thanks, Lawrence. Well, I think I've seen a number of examples where they thought they were prepared and their strategy might have been put in place 12 months ago. And they've had to revisit it and continue to revisit it because of the changing nature of the supply chain. So, it is a very, very challenging period at present to come up with a long-term strategy. So if you've got entities that have a strong desire to enter those markets, I think we'd be recommending it would be a short to medium-term strategy and a need to monitor that particularly closely. Because so many aspects of the supply chain are under stress, and that stress is evidenced through significant increases in freight costs. One interesting aspect about e-commerce, which has been, we've actually talked about this globally, is the relevant customs authorities are cracking down to ensure that these streamlined e-commerce sales are around a single sale. So like in Australia, there's been Australian customs notices put out to say, we are looking very closely to ensure that if we're going to allow those e-commerce consignments to come in streamlined, that it's a single sale, that it's not a large order that's been broken up to get under and align itself to these streamlined measures. So nearly every first world trading country, their customs authorities are having the same thought. And certainly, we're going to see that going forward in each of the, first world trading countries. If companies are going to try and have a go to get around these rules, it's going to be, it wouldn't be a good outcome.
No, agreed. No, I can see where a lot of clever companies would have tried to manipulate the system, but as you say, I think the border force agencies around the world have really cottoned on, and they're really doing their bit to smarten up on how they track those shipments.
Yeah, because in essence, what we're seeing through what we're going to see out of the back of COVID is those border forces, those border agencies seeking to address and identify new streams of revenue. Where they do want to collect, they're going to collect. And where they will allow those streamlined shipments, it's on a fairly finite arrangement, which has got to be pretty transparent.
Yeah, no, really, really important points. Marisa, can I ask you again? So obviously, I'm assuming that all this legislation was drafted and earmarked well before the pandemic. Now, e-commerce is, some say it's come forward 5 to 10 years because of the lockdowns, and the growth in e-commerce has just gone astronomically. What are the company? What about the situation in Europe? I know the UK. I'll ask Alison a similar question, but let's stick into the Europe at the moment, EU. How have companies on the ground managed to allow their trading partners to work with them? Have they been prepared themselves on the ground with 3PLs and customs agents and so forth? Have they been geared up well enough for this?
For this, I cannot yet answer that, Lawrence, because I don't think that everybody is ready. We have seen that with BREXIT, of course, together with Alison, that people were not ready on January 1st. These e-commerce changes have already been postponed by the EU, so they were actually should have been implemented on January 1st, 2021. It was postponed due to COVID. I cannot confirm that businesses are prepared, and businesses need to prepare, because otherwise they will run into so many VAT complications in the EU.
Yeah. Well, do you foresee any sort of grace period, Marisa? Do you think because of COVID there might be any grace period, or is it 1st of July?
1st of July, the changes will be implemented, and you need to make sure that you're ready.
Yep, a really strong takeaway, and I think everyone watching this episode have to literally jump onto this case and get their act together. Alison, I want to ask you, you've experienced this now for almost 6 months since the 1st of January. How's it worked? I mean, obviously the EU is probably looking to the UK thinking, okay, yes, they had Brexit and they've got smacked down with lockdowns right over COVID, but has it worked? Has it, in your opinion, as an expert in this field, how's the implementation failed, succeeded? Where are we at?
At the beginning, there was a lot of really bad press about it, because I mentioned that to get this exemption for duty and VAT for the goods that are under £135, where that's already been charged, you need to use a special customs procedure code. Nobody seemed to know what it was. So I had one example of a client who sold via an online marketplace. His goods were over in Germany. He'd added VAT to his price already. He was already VAT registered, UK company, but his goods were in Germany. The online marketplace also added VAT. The goods then came through customs, and then customs added VAT. So he got charged 60% VAT on something that was really of a low value. And there was a lot of really bad press about it. That seems to have ironed out now. The agents seem to, everybody's understanding about this new customs procedure code. So that has eased a little bit. But I think, as both Darryl and Marisa have said, the preparation for all these changes, a lot of businesses were just in denial about Brexit, hoping that the free trade agreement would be reached and it would mean that everything stayed the same. Free trade agreements don't do that, and that has been the cost certainly to UK and European businesses trading across our borders. The free trade agreement is not that tariff-free utopia that everybody had really hoped it would be. And for on the e-commerce side, I think getting registered for that took a lot of time at the beginning. That's now eased, so that's now quick again. Getting your EORI numbers, which are really important for the import, that's straightforward. That doesn't take a long time. And getting an agent, both for the UK and EU, is probably the biggest challenge. It shouldn't be. But along with what Darryl was saying about freight costs and supply chain increases, those additional costs have been a real problem for businesses because they've had to absorb them in their pricing, unfortunately, for now. So we see a lot of people losing a lot of money at the moment because they're not ready and because the supply chain prices have increased so much.
Yeah, really strong points, Alison. I think that, as you point out, supply chains have been trying to be as lean as possible, before COVID, before these e-com changes and the FTA implications. So they've all tried to maximise, but what we class in that profit erosion has taken place so rapidly over COVID because of the supply chain infrastructure costs. And if they're so unprepared for some of these new changes, that this erosion will become, as you say, it'll be a negative where it's actually costing them, they'll be losing money instead of making anything at all, which really emphasises that what we've talked about throughout the whole episode is why it is so critically important for every viewer watching this episode to rethink and redesign their strategy when it comes to not just the EU and the UK or that whole changes there post-Brexit and now coming up to the FTAs, but really importantly, every business now has, if not gone into e-commerce, but they've got some sort of growth area in the e-commerce or online type of selling. So it's really, really important that all of us in global business have seen how important online selling is and e-commerce growth. So it's not something that companies can afford to ignore anymore. And the EU as a market, the UK as a market are extremely important, not just for Australian companies, but for all global businesses. So this is a really important and valuable episode. I'm really appreciative for Baker Tilly to bring all three of you experts together to showcase these and highlight the opportunities for companies, but also to give them some guidance around what they need to look at for next steps and how important it is to get this right. So closing quick tips of advice. I'll start with you, Marisa. I'll go around and wrap up with Darryl. But if you were to tell viewers here one takeaway, what would it be, Marisa?
Start today.
Love it. Yep, start today. Very strong, very simple, but effective. Alison, what do you think?
Don't be scared about having to be registered for VAT in the UK. It's not as bad as it may sound.
Wonderful. And Darryl, just wrapping up with yourself, what's your last word on it?
Don't be afraid to ask for help, because the landscape is changing so rapidly. As consultants, we live and breathe this every day, but businesses, can be swamped unless they put their hand up for help.
Yep. Thank you so much. Really strong closing statements there. And again, can't emphasize enough how much I appreciate all three of you taking the time from all parts of the world. Really want to point out to you, the viewers, you've got some great experts available to you through Baker Tilly and their global network. As you've just seen, they can help you with the EU, UK. Here in Australia, they've got a great network as well, but they've got a global network. So no matter what your trade requirements are, please get in touch with them and you won't regret it. So thank you so much for watching today's episode. Hope you found it educational, insightful, and inspiring to go ahead and grow into those global markets in the EU and UK. Take care. See you very soon.
We are
Baker Tilly, global providers of assurance, tax, consulting, and advisory services.
Ranked among the world's top 10 branded networks,
Baker Tilly brings the power of a global network into local communities to help our clients make decisions that help them achieve their goals.
We're growing, and we are looking for you to join us on our journey.
Our vision is to combine your talent with ours, to create a partnership that helps our clients face the future with confidence.
Our impact is global, stretching across 145 territories.
Our more than 36,000 team members have achieved a combined revenue of $3.9 billion in 2019.
Our growth is strategic, and we continue to maintain a local presence
to ensure a deep understanding of context for your business.
Working with Baker Tilly means the future is never faced alone.
We are committed to making a difference for our clients,
our people,
our communities,
and our profession.
We are Baker Tilly.
Nosotros somos Baker Tilly.
我們是 Baker Tilly.
We are Baker Tilly.
And we will never lose sight of you. Now for tomorrow.